Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool, man. Cool.
All right, whenever you're ready, Mart.
Yeah, yeah. So how you been, Michael? How's everything been, man?
I'm very well, thank you.
That's good, man. That's good.
Good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to it's
It's
Good to
good
have
to
you back.
Yeah.
recreate the conversations we've had. And
Yeah, unfortunately, the last audio file completely got corrupted and
Yes.
nothing was working.
But that's convenient for me because I said many unacceptable, politically incorrect things. So I've learned my lesson and have cleaned up my act.
Well, I didn't think
for
anything
you.
you said was really bad. Or,
Well, you know what it's like these days.
that's fair. That's fair. Anything can be.
You
Yeah.
can't joke about a lot of things, and you can't talk about a lot of things. But we make do, and we live and we learn.
But so then do just comedians then get the license to kind of go about what they
I
wanna
don't think
say?
they do either. I think it's at a point where even they have to kind of be cautious. But I mean, you gotta let people live, though. You know, like people make jokes, comedians especially,
Right.
for a living. But you can't go on the internet, that's for sure.
Yeah. You know, and I'm unguarded. You know, I'm like that drunk uncle at Thanksgiving, except I'm not drunk at all. I'm perfectly sober. Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Oh, but yeah, for people that might not know you, you know, let them
Yes.
know who you are.
I am a man, a human being, making my way in the world. Yeah, I mean, we go to school together,
Yes, we do.
and we at the Munk School of Global Affairs.
Global we are.
Yes, and yeah, it's just
See,
So just as a question, well,
yeah,
update to all the listeners,
yes.
what it is that you study at, and what is Monk Affairs?
You know what? I'm nearly done the program. I still can't answer the question. It's global affairs, so you know, it's a lot of
the way I like to I explain the program at least is it's the intersection of policy with, you know, security, innovation, economics, finance, development, innovation. You know, that's what I like to. At least that's
I'll go with that.
to me. That's what makes sense.
Yeah,
It's a little bit more than just the
Yeah,
intersection of everything. But at least that's what I think.
yeah. I'll
Yeah.
go with that. That's a pretty neat description. Yeah.
Well, for people that you know, I think you've low. What's the saying here? You've played yourself a little bit low here. I think for people that don't know, Michael is a avid writer, should I say, a political genius
Oh, my
of the
God.
21st century,
Wow.
a man that knows the ins and outs of American politics, a man of both conservatism and liberalism.
Yeah?
Would that be?
All right. Yeah.
And
Uh,
that's actually amazing because
Yeah.
you're not. Well, we don't live in America, and
Yeah.
you're not really American
Yeah.
either. So
No.
where did the interest come from?
Well, you know, they're there,
Okay.
to south of the border,
Sure.
and they're like the superpower, and you know we get their news, so but it don't get ours.
Yep.
So I don't know. You know, it's hard not to have an opinion on them. You know, because you see the news. You know,
Right.
everywhere you look.
And would you say from a young age that you were really interested in politics, or was it something that just developed
it's
over
just
time?
the thing that I latched on to. You know, like other people are interested in sports and
Right.
in video games and
Right.
whatnot, and I just found politics to be the thing that animates me.
So what kind of brought that on? Was there like a specific, like, you know, you saw a certain political figure, or was it?
Yeah, just a whole bunch of political figures.
So who would be the initial? Would you say that kind of like you're like whoa?
Nixon.
Nixon.
I just like, what a fascinating
So why
individual.
Why Nixon? Why Nixon?
You know, well, he was a brilliant man who, you know, rose from nothing, from virtual, you know, poverty and backwardness to become the most powerful person in the world,
Right.
and then his own the same traits that launched him to the top of the world, then caused him to fall,
Yeah.
disgracefully. So I find that to be a fascinating story.
And that's what kind of drove your, at least that's what started the dive into politics and everything that surrounds that.
Yeah. So whatever I accomplish in the world, I can credit to Richard Nixon. It's my inspiration in life. Yeah.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And just recently, you've written for the American Affairs Journal.
American Affairs Journal. That's correct.
That and you wrote a fascinating. I have actually read it.
Oh, thank you. It's beautiful.
You're talking about tax sovereignty.
Yeah.
And taxation, shell companies,
Yes.
and tax evasion.
Yes. So basically what it is a lot of the assumptions that we've had, not just about taxes, but about everything in general, the economy, markets, everything. All of that is, collapsing before our eyes.
Right.
Ever since the financial crisis.
Right.
And there's a lot of room in the world for a new consensus, a new worldview, a new way of making sense of things.
Right.
American Affairs is very consciously dedicated to formulating that new consensus on politics and policy. And my contribution was just to elaborate a new idea of how we should think about taxation.
Yeah, and it was fascinating because you started looking at a different way of taxation, a way to collect money from billionaires, essentially.
Yeah.
And the extreme
the oligarchy.
The oligarchy.
So basically what it is everywhere you go, the conventional line is, we need to keep taxes as low as possible.
Right.
In order to stay competitive with the rest of the world.
Right.
And everywhere you go, it's the same. And so everybody lowers their taxes. And, you think, and then the theory is that, the low taxes mean that people will invest. And then when they invest, that'll create wealth for the people at the top.
Right.
And then that'll trickle down to everybody else. And that hasn't worked.
Right.
Not only did you have the financial crisis in 2008, which had to do with financial regulation and everything, but our taxes are already quite low compared to where they were in the 1950s and 60s, when they were like 80-90%, the top marginal tax rate.
Right.
Now they are historically low, but you still have an insane amount of tax evasion.
Right.
Illegal tax evasion, and maybe even worse is the legal tax avoidance.
Right.
So if you already have your taxes, incredibly low, the U.S. tax rate, I believe, corporate tax rate is like 21%.
Right.
Down from, I forget what it was. Canada's is a little bit better than that. But if you already have lower tax rates, and these billionaires and billionaires still feel the need to cheat, in that environment, then, where does it end?
I totally agree with that.
And then all of the public services that we rely on, our schools, our infrastructure, are underfunded.
Right.
And that causes, the quality of life, the standard of living to go down.
Right.
And it breeds inequality.
And what would you say to people that would see that raising the taxes more of a socialist scheme versus, because people are very scared of socialism.
You see, that's one of the things that they came up with is a scary word, socialism,
Right.
But is it, I don't know, is it socialism to have good infrastructure? Is it socialism to have decent schools and hospitals?
Right.
Is it, when Dwight Eisenhower was the president of the United States, they had upwards of 90% top marginal tax rates, as I said. So does that mean he was a socialist too,
Right.
So I think it's whatever label you want to append to those policies, that's up to you. But I think that's what needs to be done.
And with the scheme that you've created, or the ideas that you've put forward of taxation, is it more so leaning towards creating a more welfare state, or is it more so just changing just the tax law so that we help avoid the use of shell companies
Yeah.
and tax evasion and
So I have
all
a
those
lot
things
of
that lead into that.
a lot of preferences, but in that article, which is called "Tax Sovereignty in the Age of Global Capital," all I really do is I focus on tax enforcement,
Right.
and I don't say anything. Well, I kind of suggest that maybe we should raise taxes, but I don't really say that explicitly. I say
Right.
whatever country A wants, if they want to raise taxes, let them,
Right.
and let their citizens pay those tax rates if they democratically decide that's what they want to do. If
Right.
country B wants lower taxes, let them have that.
Right.
But I can't abide by this notion that Canada, Amazon or Google or whatever,
Right,
or
right.
Starbucks will make all their money here in Canada, but pay all their taxes in Bermuda or Ireland or
Right.
something.
Right.
So
But I mean,
that's
it's not just like even at some point, it's not even just a different country thing. And a lot of shell companies based in different states within the country. So isn't
Yeah.
it like you could? Isn't it that like provinces?
Yeah,
states
yeah. So in
allowed to
Canada,
raise taxes, so-
in Canada, it's particularly bad because corporate registration is divided among the provinces, meaning any action to tackle shell company use will have to be coordinated among the provinces. But it's particularly hard to coordinate anything on any policy area among the provinces. So it's particularly bad in Canada. And if you look at places like Vancouver and Toronto, where you have a lot of speculation in the property, real estate markets and stuff, shell companies play a big role in that because
Totally,
you have
yeah.
anonymous people that don't want their names to be revealed
Right.
who start a shell company in BC, and and then the legal owner, the
Right.
front owner is like a housewife or a student,
Right.
but then
right.
they start buying multi-million-dollar properties through. How did that happen?
Right.
So that's a whole thing.
Right.
And that's what I write a little bit about, but
And-
also other things.
And would you say that the majority of shell companies that are created and the people that use them, would you say that's a avenue for people to launder money and to clean dirty money into?
Yeah. So aside from tax evasion, and avoidance, there's money laundering,
Right.
which is its own thing, and there's a
Right.
whole field on that, anti-money laundering, AML.
Right. Right.
And yeah, it's all congeals to it's all made possible by the complete opacity of
Right.
our institutions. So we need a little bit more transparency
Right.
and a little bit more fairness in the way we arrange our tax laws and our corporate registration laws and all the rest of it.
Yeah. To me, it's wild that a corporate or an organization like Amazon can make billions and billions of dollars
Yeah.
and then end up paying actually zero
Yeah,
taxes.
so there's the individual tax evasion,
Right.
and then there's the mega corporate level tax avoidance, and
Right.
these are differing scales of tax dodging, but
Right.
they're all part of the same problem that people have been trying to fix. But it's quite hard because there's very little political will and political
Right.
awareness. When you go to the people on the street, I'm sure everybody will agree with you and say
Right.
that it's time to do something. But then you actually look at the policies that you need to institute, and they're so mind-numbingly boring
Right.
that nobody will take the time. Voters and politicians will not take the time to actually look into them because nobody
Right.
has the time.
Right.
The only people who have the time are like the lawyers and the top lawyers and accountants and wealth planners who are at the pay of these people,
Right.
and they have all the expertise. So it's quite hard to convince people to even read
Right.
and do some research on these things.
And what do you think would be needed to create that change or that will?
I think you have people like Bernie Sanders in the United States. They're doing
Right.
a pretty good job of turning the problem into or depicting the problem, effectively
Right.
through a narrative that people are tired of being conned and lied to and said just lower taxes and everything will be all right. So I think if you look at Bernie Sanders and his kind, I think that and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez,
Right.
AOC, I think they're onto something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I also want to make clear that it's not even necessarily only a left wing
Right.
issue. you have somebody like Tucker Carlson,
Right.
who, I'm not going to go too much into detail about Tucker Carlson,
Right.
other than that I've met him.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that yeah, that's all I'm going to say for now.
You had an exchange with Tucker.
I had an positive, pleasant exchange with Tucker Carlson, who I might disagree with on a lot of other issues, but
Right.
he's quite brave in the sense that he called out people on his own side
Right.
of politics, on the
Right.
conservative side, for perpetuating this free market myth of trickle down economics. Like so he deserves credit on that.
Right. Right.
And so if somebody like Tucker Carlson can call out the Koch brothers on Fox News for pursuing those kinds of dangerous policies, then that shows it's not even just a left-wing thing. It can be
Right.
a left-wing and a right-wing thing.
Right. Something the two sides can.
The two sides. And my piece was actually cited in New York Magazine, which
Right.
is quite shocking to me.
Yeah.
And the piece was saying that you could take the arguments of left-wing politicians like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, and you could graft it onto a right-wing narrative about how the national sovereignty of America is being undermined by globally mobile capital.
Right.
So that is something that any politician can pick up on and run on, but they haven't done so far. So
I think it would be sorry. Yeah.
No, I guess so. This piece that you wrote, was it particularly in regards to the U.S. tax evasion?
yeah, it focuses on the U.S. because it was for a U.S. publication, but generally it's principles that would work for any nation.
Okay.
Yeah, and I also tackle like multilateral initiatives from the OECD. So that covers not just the U.S. But pretty much much of the world. Yeah.
And have we not seen any change? Because since I think Panama Papers was what 2014, 2015,
2016.
2016.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's
so
actually
there's
a new. I think it's new, but there's a new release. I think just today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I haven't read into it. I just saw it on my news feed on my
Right.
phone. But it's the Luanda leaks. So it's the capital of Angola,
Okay.
I believe, and the daughter of the former president of Angola was found to be, doing some of the same stuff that rich people like to do.
Right.
And it's shocking, but it's not surprising.
Right.
And are you on the internet?
I am. I'm
Can you
actually
look up the
looking-
Luanda leaks?
Luanda
It
leaks.
just came out today or something, right?
Yeah, how this princess of Angola built a $2 billion fortune.
Yeah. So that's breaking news, hot off the press. Yeah.
Jeez. $2 billion.
Jeez, that is quite a lot.
And what did she do, or her what did her family? What was her
Well,
family?
her father was the president of Angola for
Okay.
like 40 years or
Okay.
something.
Yeah. Okay.
Isabella de los Santos, I think is her name.
Oh, you know what? I've seen her image in the paper recently,
Yeah,
and how she
yeah.
kind of took advantage of all her people,
Yeah.
and like they've created a huge empire
Yes.
from that. Like, because they're involved in oil and actually, that's all I remember seeing. is oil.
I haven't looked into this because
Right,
it just
right.
broke out. But my feeling is it's going to be another kind of Panama
Right.
Papers, Paradise Papers, Lux Leaks, Luanda Leaks.
Right.
Again, all of these things are shocking to us, but not surprising because we know that this stuff is going on.
And why haven't we why hasn't there been any, other than the fact that you said it's the political will's not
Yeah.
there, but we see the damage it's doing.
Yeah, I mean, the
know?
political will is building up slowly,
Right.
but
Do you think it's gonna require like some cataclysmic event?
well, we already had the cataclysmic event. It was called the 2008 financial crisis.
Right.
But we are
but-
so slow and complacent about this that 10 years on, we're
Right.
still trying to get our act together.
But wasn't the financial crisis based off of cloudized debt obligations and subprime
yeah, I mean,
mortgages?
that's in the financial regulation world.
Right, right.
And then, you had a couple years later,
Right.
Panama Papers and the other stuff, and Swiss leaks and Lux leaks and everything. But these are basically, expressions of stuff that we know is already happening behind
Right.
closed doors.
Right.
And if your question is, why haven't we done something about it, or why haven't we done enough about it?
Right.
Like I said, I think it's just the political inertia.
Right. So it seems like with a lot of problems these days, it's all about the political will and
Political will, and another thing as well is the fact that if you go to a place like Washington D.C., for example,
right,
all of the think tanks there, the vast majority of them, are of the same, of the same ilk, of the same mind. So, for example, Donald Trump runs in 2016, as the workers' candidate for president, right?
right,
And then he gets in, and then who does he have in terms of his staffing? Like, who can he turn to staff his administration? All the same people who have been working in the same think tanks, the same, like, Heritage Foundation, American Enterprise Institute, Cato Institute, all these right-wing free market think tanks
right,
where Republican staffers and office holders go when they're out of office. That's where they go to, like, hibernate or something. And then, when a Republican president is elected, that's all they do is then they move from the think tanks to the new administration,
right,
and then the same cycle repeats itself. So you have these people who have one kind of free market view of the world that has
Right.
been, been honed from the 1980s, and that hasn't really changed since the days of Ronald Reagan and George Bush.
right,
And they are the same people that are, making policy in the Republican Party today,
right,
even though the circumstances have very much changed from the days of Ronald Reagan and George Bush. But there just aren't any experts and policy wonks that you can draw from who will give you an alternative program.
right. Because it seems like just people are just locked into what they
Yeah,
already
it's
know.
the swamp, right?
Right.
This is the part of the swamp that Trump was apparently going to do something about. But
Right.
then he goes in there and it's the same shtick,
So nothing ever changes.
Yeah.
And would that be fair to say that Democratic administrations are at fault of the same thing?
Absolutely. So if you go back to 2008, during the height of the financial crisis, there
Right.
was a cover on Time magazine where Obama was depicted as FDR, as
Right.
Franklin Roosevelt, and he said he's going to save America just like FDR did during the Great Depression.
Right.
And then Obama gets in, and I remember what a ecstatic moment that was. And it
Right,
was
right,
because
yeah.
he's the first black president. But he gets in, and then he turns to Wall Street, the same Wall Street people,
Right.
Larry Summers, Timothy Geithner, the same people who worked in the Clinton administration,
Right.
who were very pro-free market, pro-Wall Street. And then they staff his administration.
Right.
So, they do put together a bailout, and it stems the recession.
Right.
But as we know now, it was the bankers' bailout. It was the
Yeah.
rich man's recovery.
Right.
And it helped bail out the biggest banks and financial institutions,
Yep.
but not the average American.
No, and
So-
it's the taxpayers that were
Yeah, exactly.
that got gouged there
Yeah,
on that, right?
yeah. So it is very much a problem on both sides
Right.
of the political spectrum.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
It's like then
That's why we need people like you, Mohit.
Me,
the Munk School of Global Affairs.
I think it's like people like you that we need
Yeah.
out in the States
Yeah.
creating policy because
Yeah.
clearly you have the clarity.
Yeah, and I'm
That's-
just an opinionated guy.
Wait, but a strongly opinionated person that was picked up by many large political people. A lot of like you were tweeted about. Your article was said to be something revolutionary, or I can't remember who tweeted it, but I remember seeing.
That's the editor of the journal.
Was that
rather.
was that the editor of the journal?
Yeah, the editor of the journal, who was very nice.
Right.
Because my piece was quite long and
Right,
technical.
right.
He said, but he was basically saying, it's worth taking a look at.
Right, but clearly you've made some sort of impact because I know this past summer you were at a convention, and now you've been invited again to another convention. I don't know the convention name that you were invited to in Rome.
No, so in the summer I was at the National Conservatism Conference,
Right,
which is I was invited because I was interning at American Affairs.
right.
And it was a very interesting convention because
Right.
it was all these people in the Republican Party and the conservative movement who were saying we are going to reformulate conservatism in the age of Trump.
Right.
And so I was going. I went there expecting to hear new ideas, and I did hear some new ideas.
Right.
Tucker Carlson gave a great speech, and that's where I met him. And that's all I'm going to say
Right.
for now. But I met him, and some interesting speeches were given, but about how they needed to, create a more economically interventionist model of government, of
Right.
conservatism. It can't just be free markets now and forever, lower taxes,
Right.
deregulation. They needed to move beyond that.
Right.
But what was disappointing was the fact that the stage was shared with other people who, who have been running these think tanks for 30 years and saying the same, the same shtick for 30 years, and then they were invited to give speeches. So I thought we were going to reformulate conservatism. I thought
Right.
this was the purpose of this convention. Why are you getting these old dinosaurs
Right. Right.
from the Reagan era to, to give a speech? So I was kind of disappointed that
In
they
that,
didn't draw the line,
Right.
you know.
And this new conference that you were invited to.
Yeah, this one's a little bit more crazy.
Okay.
And I don't think I can go just because the logistics of it.
Right. Right.
I can't afford a ticket to Rome in short notice.
Yeah.
I'm not made of money.
Yeah.
But it's set in Rome, and they have the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor
Right.
Orban, and Matteo Salvini, and Marine Le Pen's niece. So all these these people who
Yeah.
they're significantly more radical,
Right.
I would say. But it would be an interesting experience just from an
100%.
academic point of view, but
I
I don't
think
think I
so.
can go. Yeah.
I think people should never shy away from listening to people that you don't agree with. That might be
definitely.
a
And
little bit more radical.
And if I
than-
were able to
Right.
meet these people, I would
Right.
confront them. I would say, hey, you are claiming to be nationalists, but many of you, talk the talk and walk the walk. But
Right.
some of you just like the rhetoric of nationalism, but you go on to pursue the same free market,
Right.
globalization, 1% race to the bottom kind of policies.
Right.
But then you cover it with like this nationalist rhetoric, but you're really just doing the same shtick that brought about all this inequality and disenfranchisement. So I would like
Right.
to confront some of those people, and maybe I'll get the chance someday. But as of now, I'll just watch
Watch
from
afar.
the distance,
Yeah.
and yes.
Okay.
I think some amazing conversations come from confrontation. But
Yeah.
for our listeners again, so this article, where can they find it if they want to read it?
Oh, just American Affairs Journal. But the thing is, it's you have to pay for a subscription. You get one free article if you're not a subscriber. But a subscription is only like $20 a year, and it is some of the best political writing and intellectual writing you'll ever see out there right now. These guys are at the forefront.
We'll make sure we'll
of,
put the free article for you up there,
Yes.
so
Yeah,
everyone can
100%.
enjoy that free one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
100%.
it's, yeah.
And there's a book. Where can people get the American Affairs Journal?
Oh, well, yeah. The sad part is it's not sold in the physical copy is not sold in Canada. I don't
Right,
think you have to
okay.
go to the U.S. Yeah.
Okay. And
I got mine from the Minneapolis Airport Bookstore.
So if anyone's flying out from Minneapolis,
yeah,
go pick up
the
a journal
bookstore,
article.
yeah.
And so what is usually filled in that journal? Just articles all about everything,
it's-
or is it?
It's
a more
politics, policy. People like me who are quite frustrated at
Right.
the fact that we've been living in 10 years of just the intellectual exhaustion of neoliberalism, and
Right.
we're trying to create the new thing that's supposed to replace the other thing that failed.
Right.
And there's a tradition in the United States of these little journals that most people will not have heard of,
Right.
but that are quite influential among the political policy making circles.
Talk
Right.
about creating new things. Well, the
Yeah.
American election is coming up this year.
Yeah. 2020
And
election.
I know that is going
Yeah.
to be big.
It's gonna be massive.
What is your opinion on that? All the new candidates coming up. Andrew Yang.
Andrew Yang. We talked about this last time.
We did,
in
we
the
did.
podcast that we had last time. But
If I could vote for that guy, or if I was in America, I would.
Right.
He doesn't
Yeah.
want $1,000 though.
yeah, see, this is the thing I have about Andrew Yang, and I think I'm going to repeat. I would try to remember what I said last time, but it was more along the lines of I find it admirable that he's had this idea that he believes in, and that he's been able to galvanized conversation about, automation and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, I think people are going to need to work. People are going to want to work.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea of like a free, $1,000 every month, I think it's definitely worth discussing and studying. But at the end of the day, I think the solution is with finding people work and giving them, higher wages and benefits and recognizing the value of their work.
But
And
sometimes you do bring a valid point, because sometimes I feel like the whole automation thing is purely like from a marketing standpoint to put himself out from the other candidates that exist. Is that really a big thing that people should be worried about?
You know what? I honestly don't know. There are lots of credible reports that say automation is going to come in and wipe everything out. There are other essays and reports. There's one in American Affairs, actually, that say, you know what, automation is not going to be that bad, and there are ways to make sure that automation augments human labor instead of supplanting human labor. So I try to keep an open mind between those two perspectives. And my own gut instinct tells me that there's still going to be room for labor and for recognizing the value and the dignity of labor through higher wages and benefits and stuff like that.
Yeah, like from what I've seen about AI, and a lot of the jobs that blue collar workers are doing now might be automated, but I think the government has kind of this in the forefront of their minds of, when we're introducing automation and whatnot, what's happening. I think there will be a larger plan for almost transforming the skills of current workers, right? So might be a bad example, but even though, oil and gas right now, we see in Alberta, oil and gas workers are having a huge problem finding work there. Because they're shutting it down, they've slowed the production of everything. Yeah. But we've seen from research I've done and reports I've written is clean energy and green energy, clean tech companies are transforming those skills for those previous oil and gas workers and creating this new kind of workplace for them and allow them to transition.
You're still going to need, the people who go into that line of work are blue collar people who work with their hands, people who are physically, able to do that kind of work. Even in a post-carbon world, you're still going to need people like that.
100%.
You're going to need people to put up the solar panels or build the wind turbines or whatever, right? So I think the least helpful thing we can do is when we imbue these economic questions with like this moral, cultural significance. Like I'm from Alberta, right? And people there that are for the oil sands, they go, "I love the oil sands." And they try, they sentimentalize it, like it's like the oil sands is us. And we are the oil sands.
It's been generational. A lot of families.
It's generational, and the other side does it too. The environmentalists, they sentimentalize the narrative, and it's not about the oil sands anymore. It's not about green energy anymore. It becomes this sort of tribal conflict between the people that love Alberta and the people that hate Alberta, and it's really not useful. And this is, both sides are guilty of this.
No, 100%
of this sort of sentimentalizing the narrative. So I think people should just calm down.
It's definitely an important conversation to have, nonetheless, right? Because we are facing huge climate issues, right? And there's a big fear of the 1.5 to 3 degree change in temperature and what that might mean for global economies and future.
Not to mention, like, there should be
issues.
policies to not dump toxic waste, not not being more environmentally friendly. And does that come really from the government, or does this?
Why don't they look at the car manufacturers? Like, why don't they get their act together and
100% industry? I completely agree. I think the biggest change, not that individuals changing the way they live their life won't have some sort of degree of effect, but it's marginal compared to industry change.
Yeah,
right?
and people, might not necessarily disagree with the idea that, you really can't disagree when you look at the evidence.
Right.
people may want to help, but they go, yeah, but I still need to drive to work every morning, right? So I mean, if the the auto industry would actually come up with models of cars that run on, renewable energy and stuff like that, maybe that would help.
So the biggest thing because I actually wrote a brief on this, was electrical vehicle infrastructure and looking at the emerging risks behind it, and
because it's just as bad to create the battery, but I think it's better in the long term.
So it's more so how we obtain the energy to basically energize the battery. So it's called the energy mix. So we use a mix of both clean energy and carbon-based energy to basically create the energy that is needed to input into the battery, right? So it's not only a matter of how we obtain the energy to recharge those batteries, but it's also the matter of pricing, right? How do we make it affordable for everyone to purchase, right? Then you got to look at electrical vehicle infrastructure. How do we create enough chargers everywhere so that people can drive? So if a electrical vehicle only goes about 500 kilometers, right? Will there be enough stations for cars to charge, right? So if I'm driving from Ontario all the way to Vancouver, right, that's a 4-day drive.
Sure.
Will there be enough infrastructure in place for me to make that drive?
And that's why you need the government to
100%
build that infrastructure.
Government subsidies is a huge part of that, right? They have to be at the forefront of that.
Well, I guess until then, the truck drivers that Andrew Yang says are going to lose the jobs, they have nothing to worry about in the meantime, though.
Yeah, like I don't think full automation is a long way out.
Yeah, it's a long way, and if you're the trucking company and you have the chance to switch to automated, cars, and then you have your 800 employees you're gonna let. I mean, why don't you give them a chance to keep their livelihoods, and instead of doing the more profitable thing for your company, but then you're gonna get 800 angry young men, off into the street, and what are they gonna do?
That's the thing, right? We have this major problem is it's making sure we keep these workers in place, right, and providing for them, but it kind of goes against the business idea of maximizing profit.
That's what we're trying to overthrow. That is what I'm dedicating my life to overthrowing that mentality, that ideology.
I understand from a business perspective why you want to maximize profits, but in a time and age where changing with the climate and changing the way we do processes and the way we run industry, it needs to change where it's not only about profit now, right? Yeah. It's also looking at people, looking at the environment around you, looking at something known as ESGs, right?
Yeah.
Those are...
What is that?
ESGs are environmental, social governance. Give me a quick search there, Vipul. ESG.
Environmental, social, and corporate governance.
There you go.
According to Wikipedia, that is. I'm not sure if you use that as a...
Yeah, so environmental, social, and corporate governance. Yeah. So it's a way to almost create governance and to create standardization across companies, right? Of how we report carbon activities, how we... what is the total cost of what we actually do? Because you got to take in the social cost for everything, right? Because people only like to look at the immediate cost. That we, if I'm purchasing $30 of gas today, that's all that's going to cost me. But you're not looking at the emission costs and carbon costs and et cetera, et cetera,
and that is helpful to the extent that we have carbon.
Right.
But also, come up with those models, those new models that won't even need carbon.
Right.
Make an investment in that.
Right. And that's going to be huge, right? Is coming down that pipeline. But with the 2020 elections, right, that will be a huge kind of decider where the U.S. will go next, right, in terms of how they place their policy in terms of environment. Because I don't think Trump is a super big fan of...
no, I don't think he is.
At all.
I didn't get that vibe from him.
Yeah. And what's your prediction, though, for the 2020 election? Do you think it's going to swing?
Honestly, I don't want to make a prediction. I don't think I have one. Among the Democrats, the two candidates that excite me the most are Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren.
Right.
So if either of those two can make it, I think that'd be good.
That'd be huge,
Yeah.
huh?
Yeah.
And have you kept up with recent impeachment proceedings at all, or what's happening in the Senate?
Yeah, I don't follow it that much.
Right.
Just because I think a lot of it is, stage drama.
Yeah, just a big.
What is that going to change? Okay, you impeach Trump. I mean, I'm not. He probably did impeachable things, but you impeach him. And then Mike Pence is going to take over, and wouldn't that be great? I think, it's...
What is everyone's, gripe about Mike Pence? Because I don't know too much about him.
He's even, he is a sort of a traditional pre-Trump George W. Bush era Republican. Fiscally extremely conservative.
Right.
So lower taxes and cut spending. And
right.
Socially conservative, so visceral hatred for gays and abortion and all the rest of it. At least Trump. So the sad thing about Trump is he ran against that in a way. He ran as a pro-worker Republican, and he said a lot of things that were quite shocking for a Republican.
Right.
Like he criticized Wall Street, stuff like that. Criticized free trade. And then he appeared to be okay with the social issues, like he said, I will protect the LGBT, whatever. And then he gets in, and then he capitulates to the orthodox Republicans, like Mike Pence.
Right.
So the danger is, if Trump is removed, you get somebody who actually really does believe in all of that.
Right.
Wackadoodle. But anyway, they're both kind of, whatever.
I personally, in my view, I think impeachment is just gonna fall flat on its face.
Yeah, I mean, because the Senate is controlled by the Republicans, so there's really no chance.
Right. Even if they were...
if anything, he'll probably just stay till the end of the term anyways.
Yeah.
I think so. And there was a interesting kind of like thought experiment that I was doing with Charlotte before and we didn't really have an answer, so maybe you do with your knowledge, is if a president is to get removed from office, so Senate votes and removes him from office.
To convict him.
Yeah. Would he be able to run in the 2020 election?
I think so.
That's absolutely wild.
I mean, you're going to have to ask, a constitutional scholar.
That's what we said initially, is like, we have no idea, and it's something for the constitutional lawyers.
Cass Sunstein of Harvard Law School. But who, by the way, has also written for American Affairs. So...
See, you're in a journal with the biggest names out there.
I'll call him up. Have him appear on this show. No, just kidding.
Hey, if you want to bring him here, man, I'm more than happy. Always more than happy.
Yes.
Yeah, man. So big thing that I find fun with you is getting to know you over the past couple of years is. You are a fabulous impressionist.
Oh, thank you.
You not only of famous people, but individual people infamous people that we know.
Yes.
Your ability to catch people's essence and their voice. It's amazing to me. And what kind of brought that on for you? Like,
I'm just interested in, like you said, in what makes somebody tick.
Yeah.
It just when I began doing impressions as a teenager, I would practice.
Right.
But nowadays I don't even practice anymore.
It just comes
to me. It takes over me.
So you it's almost like a form of method acting where you just believe you're that person almost in that moment.
I see the world through their eyes. Yes.
All right, well, we'll get started with that.
Yeah.
How about Nixon?
Well, let me just say that we will have peace with honor in Southeast Asia. That's Nixon. Yeah, that's Nixon giving a speech. But they have interesting because he had tapes. He had tape recorders underneath his desk, so you could hear all of his private moments.
Right.
And it's just ridiculous, And by God damn it, Henry, and we had these goddamn queers come into the Oval Office. These network queers, and they don't love America, it's just stuff like that.
Jeez, it actually sounds like Reagan.
Yeah. No, that's Nixon.
Sorry, Nixon. Sorry, what am I saying? Nixon. Sorry, not Reagan.
And then he's like, as you all know, I have great affection for black people, but we all know they're not going to make it. for the next 300 years.
Jeez.
Just these horrible things,
And he said these things.
He said these things behind closed doors. The Jews, and stuff like that.
Jeez.
I won't even say what he said, but.
How do you think Obama would respond to that if he heard it?
Obama.
With the impression that is.
How would Obama respond to Nixon? I'd have to think that out.
You gotta give him a minute there.
I just did. Last time I just did, random sound bites,
Just put yourself in their shoes.
What would Obama say? I'll have to think about that throw another one at me.
All right, Reagan.
Well, the thing about Reagan is, he was able to project this very sunny image of himself, and everybody loved him. But then, in 2019, they uncovered tapes of me talking with Nixon on the phone, also saying racist things, and that tarnished my reputation. So that's the lesson there is don't talk to Nixon, because you'll end up being just as racist as he
You'll be talking a lot of nonsense and get caught for it maybe 30, 40 years later. Who's your favorite impression?
The strong Jews are for me, but the weak Jews, the ones at the New York Times, I don't have any time for them. That's what he said.
Give me a little Trump.
Well, first of all, let me just say, what does Trump say? He goes, if we don't sort out trade with China, every one of you will be sold into slavery.
Oh, that's accurate.
I don't know. It needs work, but.
What's your favorite one to do?
Well, the Nixon one, I like. Let me work on Trump again. What would he say?
Well, he's definitely a lot about China.
China. People say, why do you hate China? I don't hate China. I love China. I do lots of deals in China. I make lots of money in China. It's just they're raping us. The Chinese are raping, stuff like that.
And do you do anything other than presents?
Yeah, I do. Our classmates are the fun people that go into Munk school.
Oh, that you do, yes.
And I do Paul Lind. Last time I did Paul
Yes,
Lind.
you did, Paul. I actually searched up Paul Lind after last time.
I was in the riot.
And I compared him, and I was like, wow.
Yeah. You wanted to hear another Paul
I
Lind?
do, actually. I do. For people that don't know Paul Lind, please search him up before listening.
So Paul Lind is a TV star from the 1970s. And the scenario here is Paul Lind was working at Wall Street. I don't know why he's working at Wall Street, but that's just what I thought. He goes, I'd like to stimulate your private sector. That's Paul Lind right there. So.
Oh, man, that's amazing, man. Amazing.
Yeah.
And are you working on any articles now or anything else?
I'm trying to get stuff published, but it's really hard. So.
What's the biggest barrier for publishing?
The people just, like I said, they just don't care, and they think it's boring. I think the issue, our readers won't care about this.
And do you just primarily focus on just tax and economic policy or fiscal
they're
policy?
just trying to push a larger worldview about how we should reform our institutions. I'm all about the institutions.
Right.
That's the thing. Kids don't like that word, institution.
Right.
It's all about expressing your feelings and all the rest of it, but it's all about self-expression with our generation.
Right.
It's all about, but no, you gotta, it's all about disrupting, you gotta disrupt.
I think that also comes from the fact that people are misinformed, that they think that the federal elections and federal political stuff affects them more than the local things do. And I almost feel like what's happening around you is...
Well, no, you do need to look at all levels of politics, but I'm saying the culture is very against, thinking in those terms. It's all about, how you feel about things and, what you're about and what your, particular identity, at any... And I'm not saying that's not important. I'm just saying you have to think, in institutional terms if you truly want to change things. I mean, the reason why the bankers and the billionaires and everybody have such a stranglehold on power is because they've captured the institutions.
Right.
They've captured political institutions, academic institutions, cultural institutions, and they've mastered, how laws are made, how influence is peddled, how regulations are enforced, all the minute details that are boring when you look at it, but that are tremendously important.
Right.
I think we have to think in those terms if we truly want to make change.
So it's to look at institutions a lot closer and to, even though when something is boring, to really keep looking at it.
Yeah.
And what's the biggest change that someone can make if they are to start thinking like
a lot
this?
of people think that, they only have a say during election time. So they can only come in and vote, and every 4 years they have a say. But there's so many things you can do as a citizen in between elections that are probably even more important than voting. You can join a political party.
Right.
You can show up at the monthly federal riding meetings, which tend to be very boring and just, procedural and everything. But, that is the bedrock of democracy.
Right.
And so you can do that.
And something curious that I've just thought of is, do you think our generation is a lot more disengaged with politics?
It's the social media. I think it is. I think social media is the worst invention since napalm and the nuclear bomb. It just rots your brain.
Right.
It shortens your attention span. It narrows your view of the world. It makes you constantly crave likes and a stimulus. It deadens your ability to think critically and comprehensively about things. So my advice is get out of social media and read a damn book. That is the best thing you can do.
I honestly think that's a huge important thing, is to actually read.
Yeah,
reading is. And I think any large political figure or anyone that's made huge change in the world would say reading is probably one of the most important things you can do.
And rather than debating somebody on Reddit, converse with somebody in real life. Go meet a friend at a cafe and make new friends from different political persuasions and have a debate. Meet face to face.
I think a lot of people today, though, can't debate without getting emotionally caught up and drawn into it, and instead of it being academic and more informational, it turns into me attacking you and you attacking me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if I can hug Tucker Carlson, I think, anything's possible.
100%, man.
And there's a picture of me, which you've seen, right? Hugging Tucker Carlson.
I've seen that picture, yes.
We look like old pals. So that is what the Russians call compromat.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us on this week's podcast episode. Appreciate the last minute for you popping in.
And I appreciate you giving me a platform for my ranting and raving.
Always, man. You will always have a space here. If you ever want to rant again, let me know, man, and we'll get you on the air again.
Yes. I admire everything about Richard Nixon except his racist and prejudicial remarks. That is my disclaimer.
That is your disclaimer. Yes. And with that.
Yes. And I guess just to end it off as well, again, American Affairs
Journal.
Yes.
And the free article you get.
Tax Sovereignty and...
tax. I wrote the damn thing. Tax Sovereignty in the Age of Global Capital.
All right. So check out that article. And there's going to be a portion of the article where it gets extremely technical.
Yes, but it's worth it.
It's worth it if you can get there.
It's the institutions.
It's the institutions.
Like they say, yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael, again. Thank you so much. And
appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, appreciate you coming in. And thank you to everyone that's watching and listening.
All right.
Hope you enjoyed this week's episode.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.